Man, I'm just sitting back having a brew, thinking about these dudes who do these high speed chases with the police. And, it's always been something that has excited not just the masses, but law enforcement. Law enforcement, man, that's what they train for, They train for psychos and people to be, loose cannons and to go postal and to just fucking lose their minds and shit and start running, man. Like the movie, pun intended, like the movie The Running Man. Have you ever seen The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger? A lot of kids, from these newer generations, they've never seen The Running Man. Look it up, imdb.com. Check it out, Wikipedia. Running Man. Man, if you think back to that movie, if you're from my generation X, in that movie it was so cold, it was almost like it was like biblically prophetic, because at some point they're talking about how if you turn in one of your relatives, if you turn in someone, they would give you X amount of credits. You would get like credits on your barcode system, you know what I mean? And then like if you turn in a relative, you got like double credits or triple or something crazy like that, right? But going back to this, and then here's something else to think about. This is true. Evidently, around the time of 9/11, Matt Damon, and I could be wrong about this, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's something like this. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, at least Matt Damon, I think Matt Damon for sure, maybe also Ben Affleck. They were given money by a production company to come up with a pilot or a series of shows for a program known as The Runner, or something like that. And it was similar to the show in Russia. I watched this thing in Russia where a person has to run from the police, and if they get caught, they go to prison. And if they get away, they get X amount of money in a car or something like that. I don't know. It's some crazy show in Russia. I'm going to have to do some more research on it. Some people know a lot more about it than I, but the average American has never seen the show. And so The Runner was a composite or loosely based on that or similar to that Russian show. And also the movie The Running Man, or Running Man, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And, I really see the world becoming a lot like the movie The Running Man. And I mean, that's what The Running Man was about, was that society is kind of going that way. And you see an increase in these crazy fucking lunatic maniacs that are so desperate they've got to run from the police like this. And interestingly, when I was on the West Coast, that's what we used to do. Was we used to run from the police. It was an everyday thing. And they would come into our neighborhoods, and they would come in with these. They had this one particular detective. I won't mention his name because, there's no need to. And people I went to school with, I mean, everybody knows who this guy is. And he would come around with this Polaroid camera, and he would try to catch us in groups, in our group, and he would try to take pictures of our faces, and he tried to pin us as gang members, and he would try to get us to admit that we were gang members. And he'd say, "You're in a gang, right?" And we'd say, "No." And he'd say, "Come on, admit it. It's really gang activity. That's what you're doing. That's what you're part of." And they were really trying to like prop this whole gang thing up. It was like they were creating gangs. They were harassing kids and turning them into gang members. And it was like brainwashed. They would beat you down, shake you down, and harass you every day until you admitted that you were in a gang, even though you were never in a gang. And that's what they did. And so at some point, we were just like, man, fuck this, man. This isn't America. This is fucking Nazi Germany. And so we'd see the cops and we'd just run. We'd be like, fuck that. We're not getting beat down today. Fuck the police, man. And I'm talking 1987, 86, even before that. We saw the shit coming from California. And at some point, man, it was like, the fucking law enforcement, so-called law enforcement in that city, it was like fucking, man, they were hunting human beings for just so that they could create this false reality that there were gangs in the city that I'm from before they ever even showed up from California. Because there was a gang migration issue, and gangs were estimated or projected to be coming up from California into Washington State within a certain time frame. And before they ever got there, these police officers were trying to get these extra budgets and shit so that they could get extra money and they could get these brownie points And they were just pegging kids as being gang members, man. If you wore an Oakland Raiders or LA Raiders jacket, shirt, hat, any kind of, fan clothing, memorabilia, any paraphernalia, anything that had to do with athletic teams, Georgetown Hoyas, fucking anything, man. North Carolina, White Sox. Oh, man, you were in a fucking gang. Absolutely, man. There was no doubt about it. Undoubtedly, if you had a ball cap and a parka, you were a fucking gang member. If you had Adidas shell toe shoes, you were in a fucking gang. Hey, man, that's what the Everett Police Department was doing. That's what Snohomish County Police were doing in the 1980s, man. They were making up fucking fairy tales, false stories and shit, giving them justification and rationale to beat kids down. And if you think I'm full of shit because you're a hater, just ask the thousands of kids from the city that I come from. And you know what? The police used to steal our clothing. They would actually steal our clothing and say that they were confiscating our clothing because it was gang material. It was gang related. In other words, you'd go to the mall and you would buy like a fucking $400 parka, and then they would snatch that shit up two days later talking about you're in a fucking gang. Kings, if you were wearing Kings, Raiders, this, that, it didn't matter, man. If they didn't like you and you were wearing some athletic clothing that was fucking brand new, oh man, you were in a fucking gang. For sure. Without a fucking doubt. And they were beating your ass if you were talking shit, giving them any lip, and they were taking your shit and they were putting it in the confiscation room. And it was just like any kind of fascism that exists anywhere in the world, man. That's what the fuck they did. And really, people should get together, people who remember that era, and go into the police archives records and fucking bring up those old cases and sue those fuckers, man, who are in retirement, and fucking take them to federal court and sue the fuck out of them and throw those cops in fucking prison, because that's where they needed to be all along. Man, they stole tens of millions of dollars worth of merchandise from kids who bought that shit with their hard-earned money, you know what I mean, in the 1980s and 90s, and they got away with it, and they beat people down, man, senselessly, for no fucking reason, man. It was some fucking over-the-top, neo-fascist shit, just like, some people would say, some people have done with these counterterrorism laws, taking counterterrorism laws and applying it to casinos and people that are involved in things that aren't exactly necessarily international terrorist activities, expanding and broadening the powers and whatnot. That's what the police did with this gang shit, man. They made up half of the gang shit out there. And they need to be arrested and thrown into fucking prison. And if you think that's outrageous, if you think what I'm suggesting and proposing is ridiculous, well, consider the following. After the Cold War, November of 1989, fall of the Berlin Wall, that's what people in Germany did. They went into the archives and they looked at the Stasi, the Eastern police in Germany. They looked at the Eastern German police records and they found out who all the fucking informants and secret police officers were. So, I'm telling you, man, some of these cops, not all cops are bad. Not all cops are bad. I have a cousin, he's a cop. And people have members of their family who work in law enforcement. I'm not saying everybody in law enforcement, there's a need for law enforcement. I'm talking about the crooked fucking Gestapos that exist in Western Washington who have never been brought to justice for all the kids they beat down in the 1980s and 90s, all the drug dealers they robbed, all the people they set up and made out to be drug dealers, all the people they said were gang members who were never gang members, whose merchandise, pagers, cell phones, money, jewelry, a lot of cops did this shit, and it's on record. You can find out those police reports because they're on record. People need to investigate that, man. Find out who those Everett cops were and fucking sue them in federal court and send them to fucking federal prison where they should have been all along, man. They're not real police officers. They're not looking out for the general welfare or the overall public safety. Nah, man, they're looking out for their own fucking bottom line, stealing from people and fucking beating down innocent children.